So many of you were at the council meeting on the 7th. I recognize some familiar faces. So we are not going to go through everything that we went through on the 7th. There is some repetitive information, but we've also tried to sort of update it to reflect some of the most common questions and concerns that we've received from the community since then. But I also want to take a moment as we start to talk about why I thought it was important to have this meeting. Because I've definitely seen some comments about, gosh, why are we doing this? The decision's been made. But it struck me just this week that 1 year ago, almost to the day, I was in this very room for my interview to be hired here. Now, little did I know what lay ahead for me. But when I was here, some of you were there. I know some familiar faces here, but the 4 candidates were here, and we all talked about what sort of our vision of community leadership was and city management. And then afterwards, I stood at a table back there, and the public had the opportunity to come talk to me. And over and over, I heard the same things from people. I heard a tremendous amount of frustration about the lack of transparency from the city. I heard a lot of desire for more communication. I heard a lot about people feeling that the city wasn't trustworthy. And when I went home that night to my hotel room, I actually really was not happy I heard those things, but it resonated with me because those are values I have. It's really important to me that local government be accessible to people, that you feel like you have visibility into the decisions that are being made, even when they may not be the decisions you had hoped for. So the goal of tonight is really to be as transparent as we can be, given the situation we're in, and make sure we're hearing what's on your mind. You're having an opportunity to tell us your concerns. We're listening, but that we're also just sharing the information that we can. And so, like I said, we are going to tonight try and address the questions we can, given where we are right now in this legal process. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So many of you in this room are aware of this information, but just to sort of give everybody the same information, the appeal period for this decision and the EIS closed on the 18th. An appeal was filed by the law firm Brickland & Newman. This firm specializes in historic preservation, so we expect a detailed review of the city's process and decision that led to this point. So this appeal will be heard by a hearing examiner, which is an independent judge that reviews the facts and determines whether the city acted properly under the law in approving both the environmental impact statement and the demolition permit. So the hearing will be open to the public. We will be sharing that date once it is scheduled so that you know when it is. But because this is now in the legal process, there are limits to what we can discuss today. So our goal is to share the facts about how the decision was made, while leaving the legal arguments for the hearing examiner to be considered at that appropriate time. So since 2013, the city has supported preservation and redevelopment options for the main structure on this site. City staff have met with numerous prospective buyers. I'll go through a few of those in a moment. We've explored preservation and reuse options with groups that were considering the building. We've looked into federal and state preservation programs. We've worked with our state legislators to see what was possible. And then preservation proponents in our community, many of which you are here, have also sought ways to preserve the building. Unfortunately, despite these efforts, over the course of the last 12 to 13 years, none of these kind of efforts have yielded a viable pathway. So this is a little bit of history on sort of how did we get from the Masons in this structure to where we are today. And I do think it's important to sort of highlight some of these. So in 2009, the Masons proposed turning the units in the building to assisted living, but they determined it was not financially feasible. So at that point in 2009, they decided to sell the property. In 2014, Palace Construction considered developing a casino and tourism center there, but backed out due to the high remodeling costs. Between 2015 and 2017, Fall Development looked into creating a single-family residential project, but that effort was also abandoned. From 2017 to 2019, Urban Work Blocks proposed converting the building into live workspaces, but again, the cost of rehabilitation made it infeasible for them. And then in 2018, the city and our state legislators reached out to both the University of Washington and Embry-Riddle to see if they would consider this a site for a satellite campus. Neither of those entities were interested in pursuing this. Also, and I think we've got to mention down here, that the most frequent "have you talked to" that we hear is about McMinimans. And McMinimans has looked at the property. They did look at it several years ago, but they chose to not pursue it. So ultimately, the Masons concluded that preservation and reuse was not a viable option for any buyer, and they applied for a demolition permit in 2019. So the Masons are the ones that initially sent that in. Later in 2019, Zenith Properties LLC bought the property, and so they continued the demolition permit application process. These are some images that myself and Rebecca took in January when we were inside the building. So in January, we were able to go in and do a site visit. I will say, due to the asbestos and some other hazardous conditions in there, we did have to wear PPE the whole time. For an uninhabited structure, which is what this building has been, city code requires the property be maintained and secured from the exterior. So several years ago, the city required that the fence be put up around the building and that there be an on-site presence. So the property owner had someone living on the site to sort of help improve security and to minimize the nuisance of the property, so grass was mowed and things like that. Unfortunately, this is another example of the vandalism and deterioration in the building. Unfortunately, this will continue. This will continue to happen without a change in sort of what was on the property. So with that, I'm going to transition this over to Rebecca Deming, who's our Community Development Director. She'll talk a little bit about some of the analysis done, and then she'll get back to you.
So in 2019, the Masons submitted the demolition permit application that was subject to environmental review. After the property was purchased, the application was transferred to those new property owners, Zenith Properties. The EIS required under the State Environmental Policy Act, which will be shown as SEPA in a lot of these documents, when a project may cause significant environmental impacts. And this process is a process that's prescribed by state law. We received a question about who's the lead agency is versus the SEPA official. One is an agency, which is in this process the city, and the other is the person. And the SEPA official is the Community Development Director, in this case, me. And those roles are dictated by state law or city code. The EIS report has been complete, and that's what was posted July 31st. And the decision on the demo permit was made on August 8th. And the appeal period began and concluded on August 8th and concluded August 18th. When a proposal is for private project on a specific site, like we have here, we're required to evaluate two alternatives, specifically the no action alternative and the action that's requested by the permit or by the application. The city also asked the EIS consultants to include a third alternative, preservation. This Zenith EIS examined three alternatives. The no action alternative, this would leave the structures as they are. It would neither be demolished nor restored. We have received one question. We have received some questions from the public about why we didn't look at keeping the structures there. The report does look at that, both, as I mentioned, as no action and in preservation, which is discussed as part of alternative 2 under historic preservation. Demolition, which is the application being discussed. And under preservation, it's also broken up into 3 different preservation options. What's considered mothball, which is the building being preserved and kept vacant, basically secured. Restoration and redevelopment of the main structure for future use. This is identified in the EIS as adaptive reuse, which is used throughout the document. And then in response to community feedback in the draft EIS, the city had a third option added considered expanded adaptive reuse, which was added to that final EIS. The EIS concluded that both preservation options were not financially feasible in the reuse of the building. Here are some figures that illustrate the financial barriers. We looked at 4 different potential uses of the building. The figures here illustrate those financial barriers. Those 4 uses in the feasibility study, because they were we used these 4 uses because they were determined to be those most feasible uses of that building. As you can see in the first line, there's a big significant gap between the cost to rehab the building and those revenues that could be received from rentals. For example, the average monthly rent of a 1,000 square foot apartment or senior living would be more than $10,000 a month. For a hotel, the average daily rates would need to be more than 200% above an average market rate. Based on the comments received, as I mentioned during the comment period, additional studies were included in the final EIS for developing on additional lands on the eastern portion of the property, and whether that could subsidize some of these costs. Even with development of apartments on that eastern portion, it was found that rents would still be between $6,000 and $8,000 a month, still dramatically exceeding current market rates. Mitigation measures under the demolition alternative include mitigation for traffic, water quality, noise, erosion control, plants and animals, and historic resources. The historic resources mitigation includes payment of $1.2 million to a dedicated preservation fund to the city that would be established and managed by the city. This is used exclusively for the repair and rehabilitation of city-owned and managed landmarks or properties of local significance, such as the building we're in right now and the buildings around this, or the field house. And I'll turn it back over to Catherine.
We showed this slide on August 7th, but I think it's important to talk about, and then we dove a little deeper since then. But there were multiple rounds of public input, and as you can see, we received 314 letters, emails, comments. We've received more since, but this was sort of during that initial comment period. And actually 728 distinct comments. Each and every single one of those is cataloged along with a response in Appendix L of the report. So those comments and feedback we got did not fall on deaf ears by any means. They really shaped some additional analysis that was done. So I want to go through a couple examples of how we heard things from the community, and that then informed changes that were made in the final EIS report. So the first thing was we heard a lot of comments from the public on, can't you look at doing other development on that property to help offset the financial cost of rehabilitating the main structure. So that additional analysis was done. The presentation on the 7th, Rebecca went through that, and it is in the report that there's additional preservation options that were analyzed and looked at from a financial feasibility viewpoint. We also got comments that the mitigation payment to the city was inadequate. So since then, the revised amount has actually been increased by 67%. Like Rebecca said, those are funds that can be used for other structures of historic value, which would include like the very building you're in right now, and the other facilities here, the field house. We also, more than anything, heard from people that they really wanted the history and the kind of community presence that this structure has had to be memorialized and somehow honored in a way so that people knew what was on that site. So in the final mitigation measures, there is language requiring the property owner, before they can do demolish or show what their plans will be, to have a publicly accessible space that honors what was there, maybe a green space or something like that. But it's a publicly accessible area that you can really go to see the structure that was there. And then finally, this is sort of understated to say we got the comment that the trees need to be protected, but there's lots and lots of comments if you look through Appendix L about the trees on the site, the tree canopy. And so in the report, there's a lot greater detail about what all needs to be shown by the property owner to protect those trees. So I want to talk also here a little bit more about the decision that was made. So the decision to approve or deny this permit was not made easily, and it was definitely not made quickly. It is the result of more than 3 years of both analysis by outside experts in this field, multiple public rounds of public engagement, a really thorough environmental review. That when that analysis would come in, was questioned, was critiqued, and was really critically examined before it was issued. So this is not something that was just sent to us and we accepted it with a lot of analysis and back and forth. So the purpose of the EIS is to lead the agency's decision. That's like the bureaucratic language for it. But really what it means is that our community development director is our SEPA official. And it is her job in this role to oversee and guide this process. Rebecca did start with us a little over a year ago. I think she's like months in your meeting. So she and I came into a process that had been going on for several years. And her role was to ensure that the report was fair, thorough, and objective. And then to use those findings to make an informed decision. I made clear to her that her decision was to be based on the findings of the EIS and nothing more. And that is what she did, and I support that decision. So I'd like to share a little bit about kind of my decision-making process and values as it relates to this. So first and foremost, as the city, we have to follow local, state, and federal law. There are legal limits to how government can control private property. The state EIS process is one part of a system of laws that protect both your well-being as a member of the greater community, but also your rights as a property owner. So second, as city manager, I do take very seriously my obligation to be a good steward of your public dollars. And so it is my responsibility to make sure that the city is fiscally sound and that this community has the services it needs. Sometimes that means we have to make decisions that are not popular but comply with the law. So when you don't follow what the law prescribes to do in situations like this, it can lead to litigation that can be truly devastating for a city, especially a small city of our size. You may have recently heard about the city of Cleveland, who recently declared bankruptcy. And this was the result of a lawsuit they lost that was brought before them by a developer over a permit issue. I do not want to let that happen to Des Moines on my watch. It's really important to me. So, unfortunately, in this situation, the city was faced with a dilemma that has remained unsolved for more than a decade, after more than a decade of significant effort by many people to try and preserve it. So, finally, I want to address the appeal fee, because I've seen questions and comments about why was it so high. It was a little over $900, the appeal fee. That fee is intended to cover the cost of the appeal, meaning the cost of an administrative hearing. That fee is uniform for all appeals, so it is not unique to this case. And in this specific situation, given the complexity of this process that is being appealed, the appeal fee will only cover a small portion of the total cost of the appeal. So, additionally, the city's appeal fee is commensurate with sort of what you see in our surrounding communities. I feel like if I was going to make a list of like top 10 questions I get, this would probably be one or two, which is what is the future development? So let me just say, I do share your frustration that we don't know what's going to happen to that property. Unfortunately, the city cannot compel a property owner to create plans or share any plans they may have. That is outside the scope of sort of what they're asking to do. We do lack the legal grounds to deny a permit because we don't know what you're going to do in the future. However, the property owner will have to submit a very detailed plan for any future development, and those plans will be subject to city regulations, full approval process, another SEPA process, and that will also include multiple opportunities for public input. So there are zoning requirements, and there's a whole list of things that have to happen that are very public and transparent in order for them to move forward with any proposed development plans. So another very common question we've gotten about the future development is, if the building was demolished, how quickly would the city receive the plan for the future project? Again, we have no idea because there's no time requirement. There is no requirement for us to say you must turn in your plans within a certain date. So that concludes our prepared remarks. I'm going to turn it over to Raphael to sort of talk about the next phase.
So folks, when we mapped out this evening, we wanted it to be meaningful. We wanted there to be a meaningful exchange of questions, of comments, and thoughts. So we created multiple modes for you all to interact with. The experts here ask questions that they can answer, which are those fact-based questions, but also open up a line of communication with the future of the property. So we're going to start with a gallery walk, and this is how this will operate. We've put together these two Post-its here, and we think it would be valuable for you to converse and interact with each other as you pose these questions and these comments. So this one is a need to know for the property owner. Like, what does the property owner need to know about this property? This is a direct line to them, and we will make sure that this is developed into a document that's readable and workable for folks to read. What does the property owner need to know about this community? And what does the property owner need to know about you? And of course, you can go off script here, decide to just send a particular message. Yeah, this will be delivered, and we would love for you to, think, hear, or group, and then share, and then deliver these back to Post-it, Sarah, or myself. The other Post-it here is what questions do you want to pose at this point in the process to the property owner. We will have the same delivery mode, and to the city. And these are more likely questions that can't be answered factually today for a variety of reasons, where we are in the process. Now, after we do this exercise, we'll time it so it doesn't take up too much time. We do want to give folks an opportunity to go to the mic there at the center of the room and pose questions. Obviously, the experts here will have to determine whether that's a question that they can answer, perhaps a question that you should pose here, for a variety of reasons again. And also, you can just express what you're feeling and thinking. I mean, as we've involved ourselves in this process, there is a sadness to this situation. And I think folks in the city share that sadness and share what's a lot of folks here. So if that sounds okay, we're going to start by asking you to send someone from one of your tables, pick up one of the orange Post-its and one of the green Post-its. And then we'll time the think group here share in front. My teacher heart is full that you all are such a cooperative class with this activity. I really appreciate it. Once again, I want to reiterate that Sarah and I will very seriously compile all of your stickies. Obviously, you can pose a question via another route, and we'll incorporate that. We want to ensure that the document we put together is readable, digestible, clear, so that's our commitment. And at this point, we're going to shift to one mode of posing questions, letting property owners know what you all are thinking. And now this mode will be questions directed at Catherine and her staff. Keep in mind that she is going to be limited answering some questions. That's why you have green stickies, and you can still use those as the conversation progresses. But I'm going to turn it over to you all and open the mic in the middle. Sarah and I will continue to collect stickies, and I'm going to turn the mic over.
Raphael, I think there are questions directed at Catherine. So, I would like questions.
But yes, if anybody would like to come up to the mic, we are all ears.
My name is William Kennedy. I want to congratulate you and the planning director at your presentation 3 weeks ago, or whenever you all had that council meeting. You did a good job. But I have some questions. Has the staff conversed at all with the property owner and/or their representative about what they're going to do with the property.
They have not shared anything about what's going to do with the property.
But you have talked with the owners. I mean, it's a real person.
It is a real person. We have talked with them as it relates to finalizing this report, but genuinely, they have not answered any of our questions about what the plans are or if they have any property.
Okay. Do you know if a market analysis was prepared to determine the highest and best use for the property? With the building or without? Do you know?
So the scenarios in the thick report do include market analyses that look at those various scenarios.
But you don't know if the owner has a market analysis.
I do not know that.
I don't know what the city's bonding capacity is, but was there ever any discussion with the owner about a public-private partnership with the city share being covered by a voter-approved bond issue?
I'm not aware. Since I've been here, that has not been a discussion.
If the hearing examiner concurs with the demolition permit, I hope that the examiner will require a detailed traffic analysis to cover all of the heavy traffic that's going to be going in and out. Also, dust pollution, where is all the debris going to be dumped? You should know that. And I hope the hearing examiner will require a bond issue to cover all of those costs so that you guys, the council members and us, don't have to foot the bill.
So the cost of the demolition is the property owners to bear. They are required to submit traffic plans, where the debris is going, dust containment. It's a very dense report, but all of that is, if you want it, all of that is prescribed in this section.
Okay, I didn't read that whole thing, obviously.
I don't blame you. It's not like, it's not a page turner.
But you're telling me that there's a detailed traffic analysis?
There's the requirement for them to develop one and turn it in before they can get the demolition permit. So you're asking a good question, I'd like to sort of expand on. So when we say it's a conditional demolition permit, what that means is that very dense, thick section that talks all about mitigation, and there's dozens and dozens of requirements, all of those must be met before they actually get the permit. Like, I know right now it's kind of been boiled down to like, the permit's been issued, the permit's not issued. The requirements they have to meet in order to get a permit are what has been issued.
I hope you covered your bases, because I'll be on your case if you didn't. But a good job.
I'm the property owners in one next to the property, the people. And also, just talking about the traffic issue. Because I would really like to know where's the entrance where they're going to be, if they're starting going to construction, wherever the demolition is.
Yeah, so traffic plans, where trucks will go.
So if I could mention, anyone who's interested, talking about materials and traffic, there's a demolition plan that can be found in Appendix B of the draft EIS. It talks about different items such as hazardous materials. There's a section that talks about traffic and transportation. It talks about the expected debris, truck trips, and even has a map of expected routes for the trucks. So there's a lot of information in this appendix about the demolition plan. So that's the place you want to go to read a lot of those details.
Appendix B is both online and there's a quick copy right back there. It's a light read.
Richard Kennedy, president of the Des Moines Historical Society. I have two questions and a comment. The first question is, exactly what is permitted under the current zoning for that property?
It's zoned industrial right now. Institutional, oh my God. Not industrial. Do not start that rumor. It's institutional. Non-industrial.
The institutional campus zoning is a very unique zone that was kind of created for, like a Mason's retirement facility or
Or
Wesley
campus.
or a college campus. So it's made to have it's been rewritten a lot to have like a planned unit development. So it's a very unique zone that's not, it's really an institutional use. And so it's very limited. It allows mixed use, but it really has to spell out and has to be brought through a plan for a future use under the institutional campus. So
The second question deals with the possibility of the demolition permit being issued, the property then everything being demolished, and then having the Zenith properties go bankrupt or having other economic situations where the property lays fallow for possibly years or decades. What can the city do to mitigate that possibility?
I don't have an answer for that right now.
Stump the band. All right, now for my comment. As I said, there are three organizations that are challenging the EIS and the demolition permit, the Des Moines Historical Society being one of them. One of the reasons I'll give is an example that I will bring from our neighbor up to the north, Victoria, BC. The Customs House was an old building located in downtown Victoria, built in 1914. And when they looked at what could be done to it, they came up with the same problems that they came up with at the Masonic Home. Asbestos, old plumbing, old wiring. It would cost a fortune to rehabilitate the building. So what they did is they kept the facade, the four outside corners of the building, demolished the inside all the way to the basement, and rebuilt it as high-end apartments, which are selling for up to $3 million Canadian. One of the reasons we're challenging the EIS is an example like that wasn't used to look at what could happen to the Masonic Home. We could keep the western facade, everything behind it could be demolished, and the area from the facade west to Marine View Drive could be kept so that you would be able to drive by it. It would look substantially the way it does now, yet the problems that were given earlier about the high redevelopment costs would be mitigated because you're not redeveloping the old portions of the building, you're just tearing them down. And now for a commercial, those of you in here have seen this little QR code. If you'd like to help us, any donations you could make would be greatly appreciated. And for those of you at home watching this, please go to the Des Moines Historical Society website. That's DMHS for Des Moines Historical Society.org, and you can make a contribution there. Thank you.
My name is Doug Andrews, and I've lived here in Des Moines for about 75 years, and have spent time in the Masonic Home and love it very much. But one of my questions goes back to the previous questions about mitigation and demolition and the effect on our roadways. And I live in Woodmont, and I drive from Des Moines to Woodmont probably a couple of times a day. And that road is in very, very bad repair at this point. I actually have to dodge all the potholes and the sinks going in through there. Is there anything going to be done to repair that before they, I mean, I know what kind of heavy equipment has to come in and do that kind of demo. I don't think they could do it on the existing road that we have now without losing the road. So is there anything discussed on that at this point? Thank you.
Rebecca has something on that. Okay,
We'll look into that.
My name is Bill Linscott. I live in the Marina District. We've been here 20 years. So I don't understand a lot about permitting and the institutional category, which is currently established for the property. Once they get their development plans together and it turns out that they want something different, can you maybe tell us a little bit about that process that they would go through and who would make the decision about what they could build?
That's a really difficult question to answer because we don't know what they're gonna want. So without knowing what the proposed.
Talk to Rebecca about what reason.
Okay, so if a rezoning were to be applied for, that does go through a process that would come to a city council vote. So that would have a that would be a notice, public hearing, and would go to city council for a vote, for a rezone. And so that's.
Yeah, let me add to that a little bit. Additionally, the city council a few months ago voted to reinstate a planning commission. And so assuming that planning commission is in place, and let's say hypothetically, like a rezoning is what is put in, typically the planning commission has a role in that. So it's one first kind of public input opportunity. Then it goes to the city council, which is another sort of public input opportunity. Additionally, due to the size, I think there's a fair chance you could have to go through another CEQA process. So we could all be here again. But there would be a whole other process with input. Plus, this is such a high profile property, and this is such an important site that from the city's perspective, I think as long as myself and Rebecca are here, it's really important to us that you are fully abreast of what is happening. So you do have my commitment, at least, like, if plans are brought in, we will be very transparent about what those are, and we will be sure to really make sure the public is aware of the opportunities they have for input.
This is my neighbor in the backyard, so I know who he is. And he has a nice dog, doesn't bark too often.
Yeah.
I know what he's concerned about, and like I said, we can see what the plans are, the roads to go in. Because over by 10th Avenue South, we're concerned that'll become, instead of a quiet neighborhood, it'll become a major construction site, and certainly will deteriorate the whole personality of the neighborhood. The thing I don't like about the whole thing going on with the Masonic Home is that years past, it was sold to somebody else. And the owners actually met with us and opened up the Masonic Home for us to come visit and talk to them. And it was really wonderful. But since then, now new owners took place. I guess what I want you to do is convey to this new owner, does he want to be friends with the neighbors? And to let him know that he needs to be, certainly make himself very aware of what he wants to do, how he's going to cooperate, and try to work with us, and so we can become good neighbors if this is going to take place. Certainly, they're entitled to develop this property. They paid for it, and they have that right. But we understand the restrictions that are put into place. So what I would like you to do is to let them know that we have this meeting, and we certainly hope that we can meet with them and certainly discuss and see what we can do to work together instead of the battle with them, because it's going to take place. Now, I don't know if it'll be this year or 5 years from now, but it's going to take place. Somebody's going to develop that area, and they're going to do whatever they have to do to get it done.
I have strongly delivered your message in the past, and I am happy to strongly deliver it again. So I agree, and I think yes, I'll do that. Yes.
So just to wrap things up, what's next? All input from tonight, I'm going to repeat that one more time, will be documented, cataloged, and will be part of it to the new property owner, the city have. It's important to note that construction activity is paused while the appeal is pending. And the date of the appeal, once again, highlighting what Katherine said, will publish the website as soon as it's set. Please, for more information, go to the project website, specifically Snap, project email, and then hard copies of that big joint report are available for viewing at City Hall, at Des Moines Library, Woodmont Public Library. Probably want to bring a cup of coffee. So with that, I thank you. It's been an absolute privilege to be part of this process. And thank you for being here. It's important.